Right, yeah, no, we had some fascinating presentations this morning which were pretty big picture, but in my small mind were things that to a large extent as a farmer were outside of our control, and I guess the work that I've been in, I'd like to think they are things that are very applicable and ways that deer farmers can, inside the farm gate, create themselves some more money. I guess I was pretty chuffed because 3 years ago we came to the fairly convincing conclusion that porons shouldn't be used as a drench in deer, and we're actually going to compound drench resistance issues. I still hear of people doing it and sort of think, shit, have I not got the message across, should I knock my head against a brick wall? So it was really quite consoling that 2 different farmers in the last couple of days have come to me with their perspective on it, and in one instance where the individual has kept very good records, weighing his weaners through the autumn, and has consistently achieved about a 250 gram weight gain over that period. Was delighted this year to have used injection and an oral combination, and that growth rate has changed to 400 grams a day. Pretty much money in the bank. As we heard the new generation session, the weight you get your weaners to 1st of June is a pretty critical one in terms of when you're going to get them killed. So just a little bit of background here. We've had 2 to 3 decades where a single active has been used in most deer farms, and that most commonly was Cydectin Poron. Based on slaughter trials, I guess it wasn't surprising that we're now in a situation, given that history, that we haven't been able to find a farm that hasn't got, that's not resistant to those new generation drenches. The use of porons that we're able to show by measuring blood levels of the chemical is pretty clearly underdosing with moxidectin, and underdosing is one of the easiest ways to encourage resistance to develop. So just very briefly, we're pretty limited in the deer industry in what options we've got. The drench families that exist there, you've got your BZ or white drenches, your levamisole clear, and the mectin group, or the ML group as it's referred to. We have trialled 2 of the new generation drenches in deer that held out to be the saviour for the sheep industry, in StarTech and Zolvix, and in both cases they provided unsatisfactory results to use as an option in deer. So just looking, the trial we did last year looked at those individual components of a triple combination. The BZs, as you may be aware, there's a couple of them that are registered for use in deer, and that's a bit of a luxury because we've got very few drenches registered for use in deer. The label dose on those registered products is the same as it is for sheep and cattle. 4 trials Dave Leithwick and ourselves have done over the last few years showed that the efficacy of that standard cattle dose with oxfendazole was pretty poor. We were getting between 38 and 69% kill, which is mindful that we want to really achieve 95 to know that we've got an effective product. What was a wee bit spooky, well, more than a bit spooky, was that we can't lay our hands on any records of any trials in deer to substantiate that cattle and sheep dose rate as being appropriate for deer. So what we did in our trial was we gave 10 deer a standard dose of oxfendazole, and then we gave another 10 a triple dose. And I think the figures are pretty clear to see there that in our trial a standard dose was way short of desired, and while we got a very good result with a triple dose, it's still not that 95%. So what we've got, the label dose, if people are going to continue using oxfendazole at the label dose, you're underdosing, and we know that that's encouraging resistance to develop. bottom line from our trial last year is that we should be using a triple dose of oxfendazole or greater, but of course we're compromised here in that as soon as you go away from the label dose, you're into a default withholding time of 91 days, and this is a bit of a dilemma for the industry with so few products registered for use in deer. Levemazole in deer, it was shown to be in the 1980s where it was evaluated only against lungworm that it was no good. The result of that is that it hasn't been used in the industry for 30 years. Once again, a few trials we've done in the recent years show that it does actually have some effect against gutworms, particularly the Osteotargia types that we're worried about in deer. The ABC are those trials where the standard cattle dose rate has been used, and you can see a huge variation between 22 and 72%. The statisticians tell us that when you've got a product that's not very effective, it's not uncommon to get such wide variations in efficacy, so we can't read too much into the range there. What we did in our trial was to use a 2.5 times dose of levemazole. We were advised not to use a 3 times dose. It has been shown in quite a few species, goats, sheep and cattle, that high levels of levemazole are toxic and will in fact kill animals. We didn't have any issues with that in our trial, but at 2.5 times the dose we only got 40% kill. As I say, there are toxicity issues with it, and it would appear, even though in the trial we didn't have a standard dose rate as opposed to a 2.5 times, just from the recent trials that are done, I feel fairly confident to be able to say that exceeding that standard dose rate is not going to give us any better bang for our buck. It's long been recognised, a bit like goats, that deer metabolise the product a bit quicker than sheep and cattle. I still believe that we shouldn't throw it out of the mix. We've got so little tools in our repertoire for drenches and deer, and there's plenty of evidence both in the veterinary and human fields that using levemazole in conjunction with other chemicals can enhance the effect of those other chemicals. So the third family that we're looking at is this ML group, or the mectin group. They all come in 3 different formulations: injection, oral and pour-on. As I said before, we've found resistance to them in every farm we've looked at, and the undeniable fact is that pour-ons are the worst offenders. They just get abysmal results and shouldn't be used. Colin McIntosh's work at Inverness came through very clearly that oral is not as effective as injection, and so we've come to the point where we can say what is the best drench option for deer, and it's a triple combination. On all of the farms that we've trialled so far, where there's been resistance, using Cydectin injection and Scanda oral had managed to get over that 95% threshold. Obviously the results of last year's trial, we're now advocating as a compromise that you should be using a double dose of Scanda. I appreciate that's not the treble dose that oxfendazole showed to get the best result with. The problem that we've got is there's no products on the market that have the sort of ratio that we want. We really want a 3 parts oxfendazole and a 1 part levemazole. There are no products on the market, so the compromise in the short term is that to go with a double dose because of that safety factor with levemazole. And it's just a no-brainer, the use of triple combination. The sheep and cattle industry have shown well and truly that a combination is the best way to put off the inevitable development of resistance by worms. Because of the very limited options we've got with the chemicals with drench, it's absolutely critical that management options on farm are put in place. The use of quarantine drench is a must. It's something that I believe hasn't been used properly or used at all with a lot of animals transferred into deer farms. The concept of refugia has to be put in place. The notion that I guess I'm guilty of in days in practice of telling farmers drench your lambs and put them onto some clean pasture is 100% the wrong advice to give. In light of creating the refugia concept, you should put your drenched weaners back onto contaminated pastures. You want to avoid drenching adults. A lot of, and especially with the movement of deer back into harder hill country, that tends to be finishing blocks and hard hill country for the hinds. To have a dedicated finishing block where no other classes of stock mop up those resistant worms is a no-no. We've got to integrate other classes of deer and other livestock species. The use of long-acting drenches, capsules and the like is also a no-no in terms of avoiding drench resistance. Don't use single actives, use a triple combination. Now the third aspect of the trial we wanted to look at last year was the status of this particular farm. 3 years ago, we determined that there was resistance to poron as well as moxidectin injection. And if we just look at the top line there, forget about I'm not sure what the pointer is, but the names of the different Ostotargia species that we were trying to kill are along the top. There was 3 different types of Ostotargia on the farm. The names of them aren't important, but in 2010 we were 91, 77 and 100% against those 3. Obviously a composite of that makeup gives you your overall efficacy against Ostotargia. The concern was that 3 years later we're at the figures at the bottom line, and what makes the picture even more scary is that if we add in what the population dynamics are now, that these 2 species of Ostotargia here obviously make up 83% of the Ostotargia on the farm, and if you look at the efficacy in last year in 2013, 67 and 24% is as good as it gets with moxidectin injection. I'm just pleased it's not my farm and I live in ignorant bliss as to what my status is. So what we would hope is that if because this guy is really wrapped, since he went away from using poron and has used the triple combination, he's been getting animals to the works earlier, he's been getting heavier weights of the animals he's killed, so he's pretty happy with performance on the farm. What we would assume is that if moxidectin or the injectable part of his triple combination was working so poorly, then it must be being taken up by the oxfendazole and levamisole. Geez. I don't think I have to point out too much to you that the left-hand one at 40 and 8% and the right-hand one at 78 and 29, things aren't looking too rosy on this place. We're the one glimmer of hope is, and we've got to look to the sheep industry for this too, is that rather than the effect of a triple combination drench being just adding up the effects of each individual component, there is some magical X factor associated with the combination that gives him the results that he's seeing. It's a pretty fine line as an industry to be hanging on to. So clearly on that farm there's a significant deterioration in the moxidectin resistance over that 3 years. We're reliant on that X factor. I guess the big thing for the industry really is that we haven't got a ready way of determining what the status on your farm is. You just have to have a guess as to what's the best option for you. A little bit of a glimmer of hope, and Jeff was able to tell me on the way here yesterday that Steve Lethwick, as part of the deer research projects, is looking in the cattle industry to see if he can collect worms from young calves and in the laboratory test those larvae of the worms against different chemicals as a easy way to determine and cost-effective way of determining what the status of a farm is. At this stage that work looks very encouraging, and the intention was always to prove the model in the cattle industry and then transfer it and apply it to the deer industry. So it's hopeful that we will have a practical way of you determining what your status is in the near future. Thank you.